Welcome back, everybody, to Interceptor's YouTube channel and Final Fantasy Diaries. I am here on Mount Gagazet, and today I'm going to be talking about a game that is very special to many of you, Final Fantasy VII. Now, I am probably on record saying this in various other places, and I will say it again. Final Fantasy VII is not particularly high on my personal list, and as usual, at least in my view, that's largely because of when I played it and who I played it with. Final Fantasy VII was actually one of the last Final Fantasies I played. I was in graduate school in the time. My friend and I, who both love Final Fantasy VI the most, of course, we're constantly hearing about Final Fantasy VII and how great it is, and etc., etc. And we wanted to know, okay, is this actually better than Final Fantasy VI? Unfortunately, going in with that attitude, we were not particularly impressed. And in fact, my friend gave up playing it, and I ended up finishing it on my own. So it wasn't a great Final Fantasy experience, but it certainly has some very interesting things about it, and mostly I probably don't even need to talk about it or introduce it. Most people familiar with Final Fantasy have played 7, but nevertheless we will go through as usual the kind of introduction, favorite NPC, favorite character, favorite track, and favorite kind of introduced element. Today might be a little shorter than usual, if only because my internet isn't working, so I'm not able to pull up like track names or anything, but I have been listening to the Final Fantasy VII soundtrack to try to pick a favorite over this past week or two, so I at least have something to say. So, to begin with the summary. An energy manufacturing mega company known as Shinra Inc. is harvesting the sheer life energy of the planet known as the life stream as a simple fossil fuel. The life stream is processed and made into products ranging from electricity and heat to mako and materia. The latter two materials can work miracles, granting the wisdom of the ancients to the user. However, the life stream, like most other fuels, is finite in supply, and the planet's life force is being benevolently drained by the constant exploitation of mako by Shinra. Though aware of the harmful effects, they function without remorse. However, the real battle lies not with a corporation, but a force much more competent from the distant past. A long-thought dead warrior bent on becoming a god by draining all of the life stream from the planet has risen again and will stop at nothing to achieve his goal. Now, a small rebel group emanating from the slums must quell the various dangers toward the innocent, and one mercenary for hire must look amidst the lies and deception and find the man he is within. So some cool elements, very strong environmental theme, of course, which gets a big thumbs up from me. Wow, I love it when they speak in Japanese in this game. Anyway, I love protecting the environment, and if I ever earn anything with my YouTube and video game and Twitch endeavors, if I end up doing Twitch, will go to environmental causes. So, plot-wise, I'm all on board for the plot. It's really cool. And it does have some cool characters. My main party, when I could choose, was Kate Shi, which I'm going to call Kate Sith, because that's what I always call him. Vincent, Red 13, and or Sid. Some combination of those four was my go-to party. All other things being equal. In my mind, those were the leaders of the party. I was not particularly drawn to Cloud's storyline. I think some of it was simply the way it was presented. It just did not really draw me in. I was like, what is your deal? I don't actually care. But lots of cool characters. So, as far as my favorite playable character, it is going to go to Kate Sith. As I've mentioned before, I really like the Gambler class, and that's where he falls. He cracks me up. He rides a Moogle. Come on. And also, for a robot, he has probably the most emotional depth of the characters in that game, in my opinion. I just find him, again, he's a robot, but I find him really fascinating. Because when he's about to sacrifice himself midway through the game, Aerith isn't the only one who dies in this game. Kate Sith sacrifices himself too. Just saying. I was spoiled on the big death, because I played it like 20 years after it came out. So it did not also have the emotional impact that it was supposed to have. The Kate Sith did. And I love it when he says, even though I'm only a robot, like, I hope you remember me, because I kind of am my unique feature, and I have my own memory bank. I'm a person too, even though I'm a robot. And to me, that's fascinating. The AI of Kate Sith. Oh, wow, that was an insta-kill. I just love it.
Don't worry, I'll take care of ya.
And so I would always try to keep him around. Do you even know life? Nope, you don't. Waste of time. Okay. As far as favorite NPC is probably cheating to say my first pick. So I am going to give 2 here. Because my first pick is Reef Tuesti. He invented Kate Sith. He is the most compelling character in Shinra. And the most compelling character, I think, in the game. Shots fired. But I will freely admit that the only reason I find him compelling is because of the research I did afterwards. While playing the game, I did not really know who Reeve was. I did not really understand what he was doing with Shinra. Like, obviously he was getting picked on by the other Shinra execs, but in part because of the cutscenes, and in part because of the graphics, I really was never sure who was who, frankly. There was the creepy doctor. He was pretty clear. There was Scarlet. And then there was kind of the rest. So Reeve's storyline got a little bit lost in the first playthrough. But in researching the story and the background and everything that happens, he is definitely my favorite character. He has a fascinating backstory because, okay, some of this is headcanon, so it's hard for me to tell the difference between headcanon and normal canon. But it is canon that his mother lives in the slums. And so that just opens up all sorts of really problematic features of Reeve. That, he made it to the top. He's brilliant. He creates this remarkable AI, Kate Sith, to kind of spy on what's happening in Shinra and Avalanche and everything else. But he also is from a poor family. Like, he, in my view, he got ahead because he's brilliant. He did not get ahead because he was rich. His mother lives in the slums. And so he is one of those people who is so obsessed with keeping up appearances that he really has a lot of guilt, which is why he kind of ends up helping Avalanche. Hopefully for the better. I think the Ronzo and the cave are pretty related, so I'm not going to say that they're not. Alright. So, I could really talk a lot about Reeve and Kate Sith, because to me, again, they are the most interesting characters in the game. The change that Reeve goes through to start working for Avalanche. The fact that he has to betray his comfy lifestyle and admit to himself, you know, what he's doing to his mother and to others. And his mother remains proud of him to the very end. You know, he never sees her again. He just sends his robot down to check on her. That might be headcanon and not actual canon. But in any case, like, he has some severe issues, like everyone else in this game. I mean, this is a game of severe issues. But Reeve's issues I find very relatable. And I think a lot of people have experienced not this, per se. I mean, most of us are not rich executives with a mother who lives in the slums. But I think the kind of price of success is something that people can identify with. And also you know, as you grow up, how difficult it is to change and maintain a relationship, and, you know, what is important to you is what you keep contact with. And it shouldn't be the corporation and the money. It should be the things that really matter. And so to me, Reeve is really the perfect character in this game, because he's both relatable to the game's theme, but also relatable to a lot of situations that people face. But if I can't say Reeve, because using Reeve as my favorite NPC and Kate Sith as my favorite playable character is a little bit of cheating, I will say Scarlet. Scarlet is the unrepentant member of Shinra, and for some reason I do love unrepentant characters too, right? And she and the other execs are just so, we do not care about anybody but ourselves. We are going to stab one another in the back. But the reason that I choose Scarlet above the others is because she's brilliant. She's the weapons designer. She and Reeve are actually the most intelligent people in the corporation. And I like smart people. So there we go. As far as favorite track, I'm going to go with the Cosmo Canyon theme. This soundtrack, being the first one on PlayStation, I think gets to be much more robust. And Cosmo Canyon theme is one place where you hear that. A very different style, kind of touching on Native American musical themes and patterns. And it's just really cool. So that's what I choose for my favorite track. For my favorite contribution, I'm gonna go out and say it's the modern aspects. So Final Fantasy games tend to fall into one of two camps, the more medieval or the more modern. I don't necessarily know that I have a preference. I guess I have a preference for medieval. But at the same time, most of the games fall into more medieval feeling. So that might not really necessarily reflect a preference. But Final Fantasy games have always had some kind of modernity, steampunk aspect. You know, from some of the monsters in 1 to the airships being a constant theme, the Gygas Giant in 3, of course all the technology in 6, particularly with Edgar and Figaro and their steampunk castle, which I love so much. But 7 is the first time that goes all out into, you know, this is a modern world. We have nuclear reactors. We have environmental issues. We have radiation poisoning. This is very much in the vein of a lot of other entertainment, specifically Japanese entertainment, that seems to be strongly influenced not only by modern environmental struggles, but particularly the post-World War II anxiety of nuclear weapons, nuclear fallout, that is particularly strong in Japan for obvious reasons, being the main victims of nuclear war. So, I, for one, actually do like that. Again, I don't know that I necessarily have a preference for modern versus the medieval. I feel, for me, it's more,
No problem.
if the story is good, I'm on board, than necessarily the setting per se, because 8 is one of my favorite games that I'll talk about next week, and 8 is another modern one. But I do like the blend of elements, and I think that's why in Final Fantasy it matters less to me whether it's modern or medieval, because there's always going to be magic, there's always going to be summons, there's always going to be those fantasy elements, because it's Final Fantasy, that I really like, because I am more into fantasy than sci-fi, but fantasy can take place in any number of worlds, and so I'm not necessarily picky about my fantasy settings. I like a variety. It just depends on what I'm in the mood for at the time. So, that's my kind of set of feelings of my favorite things in Final Fantasy VII. I know that I have some unpopular opinions, but like with Final Fantasy IV, I can definitely respect why a lot of people like it, why the lore can be really interesting, why these characters can be compelling. Personally, it didn't really reach me, in part because of the ending and in part because of the time that I played it on, but I definitely give credit where credit is due, and I will definitely be downloading and playing the Final Fantasy remake whenever it comes out, giving it another chance. And, you know, maybe on that second playthrough, now that I know and understand a lot more about, you know, Zack and what's happening, I'll like it a lot more the second time too. But only time will tell there. Until then, keep on playing Final Fantasy, enjoy your Sunday, and Interceptor out.